What does the future look like for my kids, for your kids, for the next generation of Americans? 3 Trump appointees said to Congress is the settled law of the land and then went and did an about face on the court. The way they talk to people, the way they address people, it is bizarre. It's weird.
Today we're covering Mama Gretch, that being Gretchen Whitmer, the lovely progressive governor of Michigan, of whom sadly pulled herself out of the vice presidential race by declaring that she would rather serve out her term as governor, but she is still a strong ally of the Harris campaign and recently went on Morning Joe to discuss some of the problems with Republicans, their messaging, and the true dangers at stake in this election.
I think that my colleagues are pointing out the obvious, that the agenda, the way they talk to people, the way they address people, it is bizarre. It's weird. It is weird. I also don't want to diminish the fact, though, that it also presents a very real risk for us as a country. And weird is kind of a funny phrase to use because it's bizarre, but at the same moment, we've got to say this is a serious moment in this country. I am proud to be a co-chair of the Harris campaign because my candidate is offering us a brighter future, a focus on how she's going to make people's lives better. This perpetual, I think, aim to divide us and to inflame us and to anger us and to stoke hate is what's so dangerous in this country right now. And so I want to focus on what does the future look like for my kids, for your kids, for the next generation of Americans, for all of us.
And it is weird. That's the best word to describe it. Republican obsessions are just extremely weird. The talking points and the things they keep on speed dial to reference are just things the average person would never bring up or discuss or have their mind floating to. Child mutilation, when one, it's not even happening, but two, why are you even thinking of that? And just, I mean, you could go down the list, right? The fact that they want to be in your bedrooms policing what happens, weird. They want to be in your doctor's office asserting the choices you can and can't make. Weird. They want to be in your children's school deciding what they can and can't read. That's odd. And it's also dangerous when we talk about our individual freedoms, the things Republicans are supposed to want to protect. But again, I digress. They obsess over things like DEI, which is just a terminally online thing. Nobody in the real world is thinking of these things unless all of their free time is spent on Twitter. That, or if they're just offhandedly racist, that is. Nobody puts this much weight on implicit racial implications, especially when in most workplaces it's not something you ever even come across, isn't mentioned or talked about. And they are doing this in substitute of a policy platform because they don't have solutions to offer. While Democrats are proposing answers to immigration, childcare, poverty, unemployment, inflation, Republicans are obsessing over the culture war issues.
You know what? I think that 2 women on a ticket would be really exciting. In Michigan, I can tell you, my Attorney General, Dana Nessel, my Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, we are the 3 top elected executive officers in the state of Michigan. Every one of us was told we can't have too many women on the ticket. We all ignored that. We were bold and we moved forward, and we've given one another, I think, a platform and space to own the offices of which we were elected to. So I do think that, it would be exciting to have 2 women on the ticket. Well, guess what? There are a lot of great women in this country who are leading, and we got a deep bench right now. And so I'm excited to be among our high water mark of 8 strong Democratic women governors in this country.
For Republicans, there will be an uproar if Harris chooses anyone but a straight white man. But I agree with Gretchen here. I think the country could handle it. And the problem with the right invoking DEI or diversity hiring is the implicit racial or sexual implications and the problem that you are claiming exists because of it. It is inherently that you have the issue with it being someone of color or a woman, or in Kamala's situation, both. Because especially when we're talking about VPs, it's always about demographics they can help you reach or someone you feel comfortable with rather than outright, what qualifications does this person have? Nobody called Mike Pence a DEI hire when he was specifically picked as a white evangelical male to help appeal to the religious base that Trump struggled with, even though there were more qualified candidates. Or when Sarah Palin was picked by McCain to help appeal to younger voters and women, even though there was much more qualified candidates. But when Biden picks a black woman to be VP, Republicans are in outrage, and that's a clear losing battle to most of the countries who don't share that prejudice like they do. Nobody would say that Pence or Palin were the most qualified, but but they were picked for the subjective benefit, and same with Kamala. People on the right love to talk about, well, it means a less qualified candidate is going to get picked, which is inherently racist, first off, to assume that in order to diversify, you are inherently going to be lowering quality. I want you to think of what that means. What they're saying is that the more qualified white people are going to get overlooked for the inherently less qualified black people. But there's also two big issues with this perspective. Diversity is a qualification, diversity of thought, diversity in experience and upbringing. This can help give perspectives that could help solve issues that less diverse teams could struggle with. And that qualifications themselves are subjective to what the person who imposed those qualifications is looking for. There is no inherently more qualified candidate that fits across the board. It depends on the company, the position, the field, and the boss. Now, if somebody was picked off the street, just like right out of a box on the street, and was taken to a position just because they were black, you might have an argument. But when you say to someone like Harris, who worked in local government, state government, federal government, in multiple different positions, it's pretty clear what the actual implication of what you're claiming is in your statement. And also, again, because of the subjective nature of qualifications, more qualified candidates could get overlooked all the time. Think of it at like a job. Any job you want, you go and apply, you have 5 years experience in that job. Another candidate applies who has 3 years experience in that job. When the interviews happen, the boss likes the candidate's interview that has 3 years of experience instead of yours with 5 years. Are they then discriminating against the more qualified candidate? No, because what bosses look for in qualifications to fit a position is subjective.
We know that right that we thought was codified for 50 years, that 3 Trump appointees said to Congress is the settled law of the land and then went and did an about face on the court, is still a big question for all of us. Every one of us. Of course, the third of American women who have very little in terms of reproductive freedom. But for every one of us, another Trump presidency, another Supreme Court appointee, a Congress that is Republican dominated. Right now, if you look at the platform, you look at Project 2025, they are going to go much further when it comes to taking a woman's reproductive rights away, taking our economic rights, our right to make a living and make our own choices and access the health care we need. All of this is in jeopardy. No one's going to be better to prosecute that case than a candidate in our Vice President Harris. But as President Harris, I know she's going to expand women's rights, never reel them back.
The issue of women's reproductive rights and the stripping away of them is one that Harris realized the impact it had on people quickly in 2022 when it was overturned, and she was able to latch herself to it and be the voice of that for the Biden campaign, which makes her the perfect arbiter for this message as a mouthpiece and as someone personally affected by it as a woman, and it will be front and center in her campaign as she goes up against the man who took that national right away from so many women, who appointed justices specifically to take these rights away from women, and who still brags about it to this day. While children's sexual assault victims are being forced to carry to term, women are having to flee their home state just to get life-saving care. And as I've said before, Republicans paid for this in 2022. They paid for it in 2023. They've paid for it in ballot referendums and special elections since then. And now Trump himself will have to answer for it in November. Women are not going to forget.